Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be talking about setting up and solving the X. So this is something that we're going to need to use to move forward when we do factoring, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at what this is going to look like. So first and foremost, I do want you to make sure you have this written down in the box, okay? I'm not going to give you credit for doing this unless you write this stuff down. You don't have to write it down word for word, but you do need to have at least the general idea down. So a quadratic is a degree 2 polynomial. So that means the largest exponent is squared. So the largest thing we have is x squared. And it typically has 3 terms. So the quadratic is going to take the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So the c always represents a constant at the end. The a coefficient is always with the squared term, the b coefficient is always with the x, and the c is always the constant. Now that's going to come more into play when we go into actually setting up the x. So that leads us to the question, what is this x that I keep talking about? So let's take a look. So on the top of the x, you're going to have your product, which is a times c. So your product is a times c. Then on the bottom is your sum, which you're going to get from b. So you're going to multiply a times c, that's going to give you your product. Then your sum, you're going to want to add to b. So then on either side of our x, we're going to have 2 factors. Now, when we make these 2 factors, 2 things we want to make sure happen. We want to make sure that they add to the sum, which is b, and that they multiply to the product, which is a times c. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So first, let's go through those steps. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what a, b, and c equal. That's our first step, to have that written down. Then we're going to put a, b, and c into the x. Now when we do that, we're going to take a times c and multiply it up top, and then put b on the bottom for our sum. So then we need to figure out what factors multiply to the product and add to the sum, and then we're going to write out our factors. So let's practice with some of these x's. So before we get into putting them into the x, let's just take a look at just an x. Okay, so if you remember, right here represents your product. Okay, right there is your product, and right there is your sum. So we want to figure out what multiplies to 8 and adds to 6. Well, let's write some things that multiply to 8. Now, because our product is positive and our sum is positive, both of these have to be positive factors. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Well, 1 plus 8 is 9, 2 plus 4 is 6. So our factors are plus 2 and plus 4. Let's take a look at the next one. What multiplies to 15 and adds to negative or positive 8? So again, positive product, negative or positive sum, both of my factors are going to be positive. So let's take a look at what multiplies to 15. 1 and 15, 3 and 5. So we want to figure out which one of those add to 15 or add to 8, and that's going to be 3 and 5. Taking a look at this next one. So now I see that I'm multiplying to a positive 21. Whenever you multiply to a positive product, both of your signs need to be the same. But then I notice that I'm adding to a negative sum. Well, if both my signs are the same, the only way I can get a negative sum is if both my signs are negative. So for 21, we have 1 and 21. 3 and 7. Now remember, all of these need to be negative, so I need to figure out which of those pairs is going to add to a negative 2. Well, that's going to be negative 1 and negative 21. So then my final answer would be negative 1 and negative 21 all in the x. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple examples of when we ourselves have to actually set up that x. Okay, so for this one, now, in front of the s squared, there's an invisible 1. There's no coefficient there. The coefficient is 1. So here, my a is 1, my b is negative 11, and my c is 28. So to get the top part of my x, I'm going to take a times c, which is 28, multiplying to a negative 11. Again, positive product with a negative sum means that both of my signs are going to be negative. So let's take a look at what multiplies to 28. Well, we have 1 and 28, again, both negative, negative 2 and negative 14. 3 doesn't go into it, negative 4 and negative 7. So We can also use multiplication charts to do this. So if you're having problems finding the factors, let me know so I can get you a multiplication chart. So we need to figure out which one of these adds to negative 11. Well, negative 1 and 28, that doesn't. Negative 1 minus 14, that's negative 16. That's not what I want. Negative 4 minus 7 is going to give us a negative 11. So in our factors, we have negative 4 and negative 7. Okay, so next, let's take a look at this one. Again, if there's no coefficient, the coefficient is 1. Set up our x here. Our a is equal to 1, our b is equal to 2, and our c is equal to a negative 15. So now we can go through and fill out our x. So we're multiplying to a negative 15 because 1 times negative 15 is negative 15, and then we're adding to 2. So now I want to figure out what multiplies to a negative 15. Now I notice that I have a positive and a negative, or I have a negative product, which means I need to have a positive and a negative factor. So I'm going to take a look at the things that multiply to negative 15. Well, I could have negative 1 and positive 15. I could also have positive 1 and negative 15. Since one needs to be positive and one needs to be negative, each pair has two different versions. I also have negative 3 and positive 5, and positive 3 and negative 5. Well, negative 1 plus 15 is 14. That doesn't work. 1 minus 15 is negative 14. That doesn't work. Negative 3 plus 5, well, that's going to give me 2. So I have plus 5 and then minus 3. And here's the great thing about doing the x. It doesn't matter what order you put the factors in. You could have put negative 3 here and positive 5 here. It does not matter what order you put that x in. So let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, let's set up our x. So our a is going to be 1 because, again, there's no coefficient. Our b is negative 7, and our c is negative 18. So to get our product, we're going to take 1 times a negative 18. Now to start off with, a lot of these examples have been 1. That won't always be the case. So we're multiplying to negative 18 and adding to negative 7. Well, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the things that multiply to a negative 18. Well, because we have a negative product, I know I'm going to have a positive and a negative sum. So for negative 18, 1 and negative 18. Negative 1 and positive 18. Negative 2 and 9. 2 and negative 9. 3 and negative 6. Negative 3 and 6. So again, each pair has two versions because we have a positive and a negative. 1 minus 18, negative 17. That doesn't work. Negative 1 plus 18, 17. That doesn't work. Negative 2 plus 9. Oh, that's a positive 7. I'm close, but not quite what I want. 2 plus a negative 9. There's where I'm going to get my negative 7. So in here I have plus 2, and there I have minus 7. So that is the x completely filled out. All right. Next, let's take a look at this next one. So my a for this one is going to be 1, my b is 3, and my c is negative 40. So now I want to set up my x, I'm going to multiply a times c. So that's going to give me negative 40 at the top of my x, and I'm adding to 3. So you might be at the point where you can kind of look at some of these in your head and know what your factors are going to be. So if you can do it in your head, that's great. But if you can't, that's why we go through and we make these lists. So if you're having problems making this list, definitely come and let me know. So we're multiplying to a negative 40, which means we have a negative and a positive in our factors. So we have 1 and negative 40, negative 1 and 40, 2 and negative 20, negative 2 and 20. 3 isn't going to work. I have 4 and negative 10, negative 4 and 10. I also have 5 and negative 8, and negative 5 and 8. Well, I'm looking at 5 and 8, and I'm thinking, okay, 5 and 8 somehow can give me 3. Well, I want my answer to be a positive 3. So to get a positive 3, I'm going to have to use a positive 8 and a negative 5. Again, these two numbers can be flip-flopped within the x, and that's still okay. So let's take a look at number 8 and number 9. So we're going to set up our x. So now my a is equal to 2. Remember, my a always comes with the squared term. My b always comes with the x term. and my c always comes with the constant. So now to get the upper part of my x, I need to multiply a times c. So 2 times a negative 9 is going to give me a negative 18, adding to a negative 7. Well, conveniently, take a look at number 6. We did this exact same x already. So negative 2 or negative 9 and positive 2. So occasionally, your x's will end up working out the same. They may be completely different quadratics, but sometimes their x is still the same. Okay, let's take a look at number 9 and then we're done. So setting up the x for number 9. My a is equal to 5, my b is equal to negative 2, and my c is equal to negative 7. So now I'm taking negative 7 times 5. So negative 7 times 5 gives me a negative 35, adding to a negative 2. So let's go ahead and write out our factor list. So we have a negative product, which means we're going to have a positive and a negative factor. So let's take a look at negative 35. Well, we have 1 and negative 35, negative 1 and 35. Well, 2 isn't going to work because it's an odd number. 3 isn't going to work. 4 doesn't work. So next is 5. So we have 5 and negative 7 and negative 5 and 7. So between those, I want to figure out which of those pairs adds to negative 2. And that's going to be 5 and negative 7. So that's your x completely filled out for number 9. Okay, so that actually concludes your note video today. Make sure you have everything filled in, and I will give you your homework sheet for tomorrow. Thanks for listening.